This content is not suitable for children and may contain depictions of violence.
Hi, I'm your host Cambo. Grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is True Crime Island, another true crime podcast. Well, our Islanders, sorry about the audio last week. I made a couple of changes, didn't know the audio changed as well. Anyway, that's all sorted out. Now, the last few episodes have all had a similar theme. People being murdered by those very close to them. And tonight, I can tell you, is no different. This was suggested by Tony, one of the Facebook moderators. And hi, Tony. And let's just get straight into it. Now, tonight, I reference abc.com, some court video, and it's actually got an episode on forensic files on this, so there's not too much to reference this week. Okay, so it's 2005, and we go to New York State, Weedsport, to be precise. I think that's how you say it. Where Stacey Ruth Castor and David Castor live with their daughters and stepdaughter respectively. You see, Ashley 17 and Bree 14 were from Stacey's previous marriage to Michael Wallace. Now, he died in the year 2000, and we'll get to her previous marriage a little bit later. 38-year-old Stacey and 48-year-old David Castor were married in 2003, and they worked together at their air conditioning service business, Liverpool Heating and Air Conditioning. Now, David treated Stacey very well, buying her whatever she wanted and took her out to fancy restaurants. That word fancy, it's a funny word, isn't it? Fancy. Danny Coleman, one of Stacey's friends, said that Stacey was loved. She was treated like a lady. But all that would come to an end Monday, the 22nd of August, 2005. Now, Stacey had gone to work at the aircon business and became worried that her husband, David, hadn't turned up to work. Now, she called 911 and told the operator that she was worried about David as they'd been arguing over the weekend and he'd locked himself in the bedroom. Now, he hadn't turned up to work and she was worried because he had a gun in the room. So, she ended up meeting up with Sergeant Robert Willoughby of the Onondaga County Sheriff's Department at the house, and they proceeded to do a welfare check. Now, the officer knocked on the bedroom door and there was the noise of a TV running, but no response from David. As the door was locked, he kicked it in, and there, stretched out on the bed, was David Castor, dead as a doornail. The bed was covered in vomit, which had run down the side of the covers and pooled on the floor. In fact, there was spew everywhere, on the bed, on the floor, into the ensuite bathroom, and Stacey asked the officer if he was okay, and is he okay? And the reply was, no, he's not. Stacey screamed, he's not dead, he's not dead. And a friend from next door, Lynn Pulaski, came and consoled her. Now, initial investigation of the bedroom showed an empty bottle of Ocean Spray Light Cranberry Juice, which is on special at Woolies this week, I just saw. An empty glass, glass half filled with a green liquid, and a bottle of Hiram Walker apricot flavoured brandy. On the floor was a large container of antifreeze liquid, and under the bed was a shotgun. An autopsy would show that David had died from ethyl-glycol poisoning, which is what that green liquid in the glass was, and of course, it's what makes up antifreeze, which was the bottle found on the floor next to the bed. Now, Stacey told police how they'd been arguing over the weekend and that David had been drinking. On the Sunday, he locked her out of the bedroom and she slept on the couch. She went to work on the Monday morning, and when he didn't turn up, she was worried enough to call for help. Now, while searching through the house, investigators, they found a turkey baster in the kitchen bin. Now, it looked as though it had a small amount of green liquid in it, so it was taken and forensically examined. The coroner ruled David's death a suicide, which surprised his immediate family as they never thought he would ever kill himself. That is, wasn't a candidate for it. Luckily, the police investigating the case thought there was a lot more to it than suicide, as they'd learned about Stacey's first husband's death, and that was just a few years before. When they tested the two glasses on the bedside table, The empty one that had been used for the brandy and cranberry juice had David's fingerprints on it. However, the one that contained the green antifreeze on it, in it, only had Stacey's fingerprints on it. Also, when the turkey baster was tested, the green liquid in it was found to be antifreeze, and David's DNA was found on the tip of it. So, the cops weren't about to let this go. They knew from experience that this whole thing looked suspicious, so they started to look a lot closer at Stacey Castor. Now, police would wiretap her phone lines, and also they had surveillance cameras not only at her home, but also looking over the grave sites of her husbands. Yes, she had them buried both side by side with the intentions of one day being buried between them. There you go. Even though Stacey had told police how much she loved her husbands, not once did she ever visit the graves. Now, Stacey's first husband, Michael Wallace, he had apparently died of a heart attack. Now, for a few months before his death, family members had noticed him feeling intermittently sick and had told him to go and get checked out. Now, before he could do so, and men are notorious for not going to see doctors, he passed away. Ashley, who was only 11 years old at the time, was home alone with him. Now, Stacey told hospital staff how he had heart problems and that his death would be found to be a heart attack by the doctors. Now, Michael's side of the family was suspicious as he had no history of heart disease and they wanted to get an autopsy to be performed. However, Stacey, she's next of kin, she refused, so Michael's death was recorded as a heart attack. So getting back to the David Castor death, investigators had a theory that Stacey had force-fed him with antifreeze using the turkey baster. Okay, so ethyl-glycol. Righto, let's have a look at what it is and what it does to you. Well, ethyl-glycol is a colourless, odourless sweet liquid commonly found in antifreeze where the bright green dye is used so you can't mistake it for anything else. You know, oh, give me that lime green stuff, that looks good. Anyway, now because of this being odourless, it can be mixed into a drink, especially an alcoholic drink. And the effects are masked by the alcohol, as the first stage of ethyl-glycol poisoning is that you'll feel intoxicated, dizzy, you'll be lacking coordination of muscle movements, you'll be drooling, depressed, have slurred speech, seizures, abnormal eye movements, headaches, and confusion. Now, that might sound like most people's Saturday or Sunday mornings. Now, for this first stage, that lasts between 30 minutes and 12 hours. Now, stage 2, which goes from about 12 hours to 36 hours, the signs of alcohol poisoning subside, but the damage to your body is still occurring. Now, you may have an elevated heart rate, feel dehydrated, and have high blood pressure. Now, these symptoms are a result of accumulation of organic acids formed by the metabolism of ethylene glycol, and most deaths occur during this stage. Then there's the third stage, if you get to the third stage, which is between about 24 hours and 72 hours. And this is where your kidneys fail, with calcium oxalate crystals forming, and you get severe lethargy, coma, you have depression, vomiting, seizures, drooling, and you'll lose your appetite. Yeah, I can imagine if you've had 3 days of this. If your kidneys fail at this stage, you may recover, but your chances aren't high. So, who would commit suicide like this when you have a gun under your bed? 72 hours of agony, or shoot yourself and get it over quickly. Now, this just didn't make sense, and little bit by little bit, investigators built a case against Stacey Castor. So the investigators got permission to dig up Michael Wallace's body on the 5th of September to do an autopsy, and guess what? He had crystals in his kidneys indicating ethyl-glycol poisoning. Now, police went to Ashley's school on the 7th of September. That's 2007. Sorry, I didn't mention it before. Now, it was her first day of uni, and they told her they dug up her father as they were suspicious of his death. Then Ashley called her mum and told her about the cops rocking up at her school, and this freaked Ashley out a little bit. So, on the 7th, police would interview Stacey, and she mentioned that David probably got the idea to kill himself with antifreeze after they watched a crime doco about Lynn Turner, who'd killed two husbands, one in 95 and the other in 2001, with antifreeze. But when she mentioned antifreeze, she didn't say antifreeze, she said anti-free. Anti-free. Now, this small little mistake would become a very important thing down the track. On Friday the 14th of September, Ashley came home from uni and sat with her mum. Now, Stacey offered her a drink, an alcoholic drink, which Ashley thought tasted funny. Now, Ashley felt dizzy and crashed out in her bedroom. The next day, Bree, Ashley's sister, went into her room to check on her and found her drooling and unresponsive. She called 911 and Ashley was rushed to emergency. The doctors said that if it had been, say, 10 minutes later, she would have been dead. Now, back at home, Stacey produced a suicide note that was next to Ashley's bed. Now, I'm going to read this out, and it's so difficult to read this out because the way it's been written, it's just, and I will have to make corrections because it just doesn't make as much sense unless I do correct some of the words in there, but it is so hard to read. And on my audio podcast, it took about 5 goes to just get through it. Anyway, it says, Mummy, when you read the letter, just remember I love you and everything I did is because I love you. I'm sorry all of this is happening to you, but now everyone is going to know what really happened and they know it wasn't you. It was me. No one was ever supposed to know about Daddy. Now that's Daddy, that's Michael Wallace. I told you when Daddy died it was all my fault, and it was. Daddy was doing things you never knew about. He was drinking when he was at Pick and Pull House, and at Lisa's house he was smoking pot again too. I saw him. He was mean to you and me, and he only ever loved Bree. I couldn't let him do those things to you anymore. You think I don't remember how things were. But I do, and I didn't want to ever live like that anymore. It wasn't fair to you or me. Daddy wasn't going to be good to you or me ever, only to Bree. I couldn't stand it anymore. The cops said there was anti-free in Daddy's body, but did they tell anyone about the rat poison too? When I got home from school that day, I know what was going on. Daddy was barely breathing. I knew he was going to die. That's why I didn't call you for help or anyone else. I wanted to make sure he couldn't be mean to you or me anymore. He died before I went to pick Bree up from school. I watched him and I knew he couldn't hurt you anymore. Then we were happy for a while, just the three of us. And then you married David, and he was mean to you too. He was mean to all of us, meaner than Daddy. And I know you loved him like you loved Daddy, and you were going to let him treat you like he did, and you wouldn't leave. It wasn't fair, Mummy. He didn't love you, me, or Bree. I never thought anyone would miss David. No one but you loved him. It was harder than with Daddy because you were always home or with him, but I did it. I made sure he would never hurt you anymore. So that Friday when David came home so you could go to the post office is when I first did it. It was easy. I asked him if he wanted something to drink, and I put the antifreeze in his glass with some soda. He drank 2 whole glasses. That was, it only took longer for David than with Daddy. Once I put the antifreeze in Daddy's Gatorade, it only took a day or so, and that's when he died. When you were sleeping on the couch after David locked himself in the room, I got the extra key because I knew where he hid it, and I put stuff in the room. I tried to get him to drink some of that booze with the dropper thing, but he was out of it and wouldn't. I poured the antifreeze in the glass and on the floor and left the bottle in the room, and then I put the gloves back in the kitchen and got ready for work. You never knew, and now all these cops are saying all this stuff about you to everyone you know and love. Mummy, it's just not fair. When you told me they dug Daddy up, I knew what was going to happen. No one was ever supposed to know, Mummy, and now they do, and they think you did it. But you didn't. It was me. When the cops came to my school today, I thought they had figured it out, and I was going to go to jail, but they didn't take me. Mummy, I can't live like this and watch what they're going to do to you anymore. But I can't go to jail for the rest of my life. I can't put you through that. I did the only thing I could to help you, Mummy. I know you hate me for doing what I did, but Mummy, remember I love you more than anything, and I did it for you and for us. Please forgive me, Mummy. Someday, when all of this is over, please forgive me. Make sure you take care of Bree. She's all you have left now. Remember how happy we were all together, and you will be happy again, I promise you. Mummy, tell Matt I love him, and I'm sorry. Tell Bree to be a good girl for you. I love her now too. Please don't hate me. Remember, I love you. Ashley. Now, this was printed out from Microsoft Word and it was unsigned, as you can see from the photo. It just has Ashley's name at the end. Well, who would have thunk? It was all Ashley all along. Or was it? The cops would be waiting for Ashley to come out of a coma. Yes, she survived the drug overdose. And when she woke up, they straight away asked her why she attempted suicide. She was totally confused, saying she'd never written a note and she hadn't taken any pills. Now, police can get a pretty good idea if you're telling the truth when they ask these sort of questions. And it was the way Ashley reacted when they became suspicious that Stacey had tried to poison her daughter. So now they had Stacey Castor, twice widowed, first husband thought to have died having a heart attack, but then when her second husband dies a few years later from antifreeze in her system, they dig up her first husband, do an autopsy, and find he died of antifreeze as well. The investigators then let it be known that she's under suspicion of being involved in both deaths, and then her daughter nearly dies from a drug overdose with a suicide note printed out, unsigned, next to her bed, detailing how she killed both Michael Wallace and David Castor. Now, police had wiretaps on Stacey's phone lines and had been monitoring her for quite a while, even before Ashley overdosed. And as I mentioned before, they had cameras watching over Michael and David's graveside and noticed that Stacey, who said she loved her husband so much, never went to visit him. They seized the computer from Stacey's house, and it was a shared computer, so Ashley, Bree and Stacey used it. Now, they were able to forensically recover not only the so-called suicide note, but also fragments of a previous version of the note. This is because Microsoft Word auto-saves documents every few minutes, and if these auto-save files are not written over, then they're still on the PC, even if you think you've deleted the file. Deleted your browser history. What would be of most interest to the investigators would be the timestamps of these files. Okay, so police would arrest Stacey and charge her with murder of her husband David Castor and the attempted murder of her daughter Ashley. You see, even though Stacey denied writing the suicide note and killing her husband and trying to kill her daughter, there was so much evidence, some circumstantial, to prove she was the culprit. Ashley and Bree, they were just devastated. Their mother that they loved so much not only killed their father, but also their stepfather, and tried to blame it on them. Well, blame it on Ashley, and then try and kill Ashley. I mean, what the fuck? What must be going on in your mind as a mother to try and frame your daughter for 2 murders and then try and kill her? You really have to be fucked in the head. Still, she denied any involvement and pled not guilty at her trial. And get this, she took the stand as well. Now, this is the typical narcissistic type of move. And how many times do we see this? These narcissistic types take the stand in their trials. They think they're so smart they can fool the prosecution and the jury. So, the main points of the prosecution, this probably sealed her fate. The Word document, which was basically a full confession for 2 murders, was proved not to be written by Ashley because of the timestamps of the fragments of autosave files and the file itself. Ashley was at school at the time these were created, so she had an alibi. Also, the suicide note mentioned rat poison, which was only known to the killer as being used as well as the antifreeze when that was used on Michael Wallace. So whoever wrote this note was the killer, and Ashley couldn't have written the note. Also, the word antifree appears 4 times in the note, and this is what Stacey thought antifree was. So her mistakenly calling antifreeze antifree not only occurred in the note, but also when police interviewed her before, which was noted by the investigator at the time. On the glass of the bedside table, which had antifreeze in it, that glass only had Stacey's fingerprints on it. The other glass with the cranberry and brandy remnants had David's on it. The turkey baster that was found in the kitchen bin, it had remnants of antifreeze in it and also David's DNA on the tip. So it was shoved down his gob to get more antifreeze in. The container that the antifreeze came from was found on top of all that vomit, which is absolutely everywhere, and it had no vomit on it. So it was placed next to the bed after David had been spewing everywhere. So this is what they reckon went down. Michael Wallace was given doses of antifreeze in his Gatorade, and this made him sick over a period of a few days. On the day he died, Stacey gave him some rat poison as well to speed up the poisoning. She then went out, leaving her very sick husband alone with the girls. Ashley was only 12 at the time and stayed home to take care of her obviously sick father, who eventually later that day died. Bree had gone to school, by the way, in the morning. Stacey refused an autopsy and hinted to the doctor that Michael had a history of heart problems, which was totally untrue. And the doctor seemed to believe it and just say, yeah, heart attack will do. His death was put down as a heart attack, and Stacey got $50,000 insurance payout. A couple of years later, she marries David Castor, and a couple of years more, he gets sick and dies. This time it's known to be ethyl-glycol poisoning from antifreeze, and Stacey's story in the bedroom thing indicates a suicide. David's DNA is found on the tip of this discarded turkey baster, which also had antifreeze in it. And over 3 days, from Friday night to Monday morning, David died an agonising death from this ethyl-glycol poisoning, with the turkey baster being used to inject more antifreeze into his stomach, as pouring it in with a glass wasn't working for Stacey. When forensics examine the scene and Stacey is put under surveillance, they dig up Michael Wallace and they find he died from ethyl-glycol and rat poisoning. When Stacey sees that she's going to get busted, she makes a plan over a couple of days to frame her daughter for it all. She gives her daughter Ashley a drink one afternoon, which is laced with pills and Lexapro it looks like, which causes drowsiness, dizziness, nausea, and will obviously kill you if you have an overdose. She then prints off a suicide note and combo confession in Ashley's name. Now she'd been writing that over a period of a few days. Now when Ashley didn't die and it was proved that only the killer could have written that note, and Ashley wasn't there when it was created, this all pointed to Stacey being the perpetrator. Still, in the doc, Stacey refused to admit she did it, saying it was her daughter who was sitting in the court. If you watch this on YouTube, it's absolutely amazing that a mother could do and say what she was doing. Stacey accusing her daughter of the two murders and then saying that she tried to commit suicide. Also, it was found that Stacey forged and altered David Castor's will, so his son from a previous marriage was basically cut out and everything would go to her. Bitch! On February the 5th, 2009, Stacey was found guilty of second-degree murder in the poisoning death of David Castor and the attempted second-degree murder for overdosing her daughter Ashley Wallace with drugs and vodka. Stacey was sentenced to the maximum of 25 years to life for the murder of David Castor and to another 25 years for the attempt to kill Ashley. For forging David's will, he ordered Castor to serve an additional 16 months to 4 years in prison, all to be served consecutively. I'll just insert the judge's comments here. Here you go.
You know, in my 34 years in the criminal justice system as a lawyer and as a judge, I've seen serial killers, I've seen contract killers, I've seen murderers of every variety and stripe, but I have to say, Mrs. Castor, you are in a class by yourself. What you did to David Castor can only be described as premeditated torture. And while you're not being held accountable for it here, I must say that what you did to Michael Wallace was also premeditated torture. The premeditation is not something we often see in the criminal courts, but it certainly is present in both of these instances. Now, as bad and as evil as that is, what you tried to do to your daughter Ashley is simply something that I find I almost can't comprehend. I've seen a lot of defendants come through this court system, including some whose parents tried to take the blame for what they did, but I've never seen one who was prepared to sacrifice their child to shift the blame away from themselves. You know, I listened carefully to the testimony of both your daughters, and I have daughters too. Now, they're older than yours, but they have a similar gap in their ages. And I listened not only to the wonderment of your daughter Ashley as she tried to comprehend what you did to her, I also listened to the horror your daughter Bree experienced in finding her older sister almost dead. You not only deprived those children of their father, but you were prepared to deprive them of one another. And I'm certain that your daughters, like my daughters, like most children who have siblings, expect and are comforted by the knowledge that when their parents pass on, they'll at least have each other to grow old and share life with. You almost succeeded in murdering one child and orphaning the other. You know, that ranks in my judgment as one of the most reprehensible things I think I've ever seen in the criminal justice system. I know that you maintain your innocence, but I'll tell you, in my view, the evidence of your guilt is overwhelming. Unlike many defendants who pass through my courtroom, you're not just a danger to the general public, you're a danger to the people who love you and are closest to you. And I believe that the sentence I'm about to impose will remove that danger once and for all. Upon your conviction for murder in the second degree, the murder of David Castor on count 1 of the indictment, it's the sentence and judgment of the court that you be sentenced to a minimum of 25 years and a maximum of life in the New York State Correctional System. Upon your conviction for attempted murder in the second degree of your daughter Ashley Wallace on count 2 of the indictment, it is the sentence and judgment of the court that you be sentenced to a determinate sentence of 25 years in the New York State Correctional System, to be followed by a 5-year period of post-release supervision. I direct that sentence run consecutive to the sentence I've just imposed on count 1 of the indictment. Upon your conviction of offering a false instrument for filing in the first degree on count 3 of the indictment, it's the sentence and judgment of the court that you be sentenced to a minimum of 1 1/3 years and a maximum of 4 years in the New York State Correctional System. I direct that sentence to run consecutively to the sentence I've imposed on counts 1 and counts 2 of the indictment. There's a $275 surcharge. Ms. Castor, you have 30 days with which to appeal the sentence and judgment of the court. We are recessed.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. She wasn't tried for the murder of her first husband, Michael Wallace, as her sentence was 51 years and effectively a life sentence. Well, Islanders, what the actual fuck with her? What an absolute bitch. But that's not all. Stacey would be suspected of also killing her father, who died on the 22nd of February 2002, shortly after she visited him in hospital, where he had a minor lung complaint. So, grab a beer, pull up a deck chair. No, Stacey, that's okay. I'll get my own drink. Boom, fuckalunga. Anyway, the bitch died in prison on June the 11th, 2016. It's just amazing. Killing husbands and trying to kill her own daughter and blame everything on her. I think this is why we all get into true crime. It's just amazing what goes on. You just can't make this shit up. Now, Nigel Cawthorne featured Stacey in his book Killer Women, and the dedication read, "To my girlfriend, Crystal Nassam. She has promised not to try this at home." Well, there you go. Okay, so that's it for this week and the end of another episode. If you want to support the island, there are links in the description for Patreon, PayPal and merch. Please feel free to comment, like and subscribe, and I would really appreciate it if you share the channel. Hit the bell to be notified for new episodes, usually once a week. I get a bit late sometimes, and I can't film it, or it all goes terribly wrong, and I have to stop and do it the next day like happened last week. Anyway, you've got to help me out here because I don't bleep out the swearings. I use words like murder and all that, and the YouTube gods just won't promote the channel. So your subscription and sharing are really well appreciated in getting more people onto the island. We're starting to get a few more. Again, subscribe and comment on the 1,000 subscriber giveaway video for a chance to pick up a free t-shirt. The winner will be chosen maybe next week, but very soon. We'll let a few more people get in there. And that's about it. I've been your host, Cambo. You've been watching True Crime Island. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. Good night. Boom, fuckalunga.